Hello and welcome to the garden. It is a beautiful sunny day out. Everything is a little brisk, but also super spring-like. And so many of the perennials are starting to come up. So I was just coming out here to do a little bit of an inventory and kind of see what's coming up so far, if I think maybe I lost anything. And I thought I would just take you along too, to kind of show how the perennials fared over the winter, especially the container perennials, because a couple of them I haven't seen signs of life yet, so I'm a little bit worried. But then also kind of show you how the in-ground plantings are looking and the perennials are doing in those, because lots of things are starting to sprout and come up, and it just feels like spring out there. Even though it's chilly, we've had a couple kind of cooler nights, we're definitely still getting frosts. It's almost like you can tell by the sunlight that spring is coming. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it just looks different out here. I lived on a lake and we had these huge weeping willows. They were just gorgeous, and they were always like the first thing to start to leaf out in the spring, and it was just always so beautiful and kind of magical and whimsical. I planted this corkscrew willow in the corner of my garden because, I don't have room for a weeping willow. I always want to have a willow in my garden. I think that's probably my favorite tree. Weeping willows are probably my favorite tree, but what is it about a willow tree? I don't know if it's The Wind in the Willows was always my favorite book growing up as a kid. I still love that book. So I don't know if it's that or if it's just like something about the look of them. It's just great. And it's nice at this time of the year to have something that leaves out early, because it kind of kickstarts sort of the whole spring look in the garden and just gets everything going. But we are having some of the perennials coming up. So over here in this bed last year, I put in a phlox. So this is just going to be the second year for this phlox. And then I also put in some echinacea and some black-eyed Susans, and so you can see the phlox starting to come up. They're really pretty even before they start blooming. I think they're a really pretty foliage plant, and there's just the tiniest little bits. So this is where the black-eyed Susan would be, and there's an echinacea back there. They don't look very robust yet, so I'm not entirely sure, but it's all going to be kind of like the second season for those, so I don't expect them they're going to be bigger than they were last year, hopefully. Second year perennials are definitely a big change, but I'm just really glad that the phlox wintered over well and came up. I've got another phlox over here that's coming up, and yeah, I want to add maybe another perennial over in this section. I'm not entirely sure. Over here, excitingly, I planted an allium, so I've got an allium coming up. And then there's some black-eyed Susans over there. And of course, this is my big established perennial phlox, and I love it. I am blanking on the name of it. I'm gonna have to think if I can figure out what was the name of this phlox. It is the prettiest pink phlox. It is so beautiful. There's some more black-eyed Susans over in this corner, which will hopefully take off. And then I've shared, this is where I'm gonna plant some of the milkweed. I'm gonna put some sunflowers, probably put some of my sea holly in this area. Really like fill it in a little bit. Maybe some coleus too, because it does get a little bit of shade over here in the corner. Maybe a couple zinnias and some basil. And then this is the corner where my other rose is going to go. But my new rose, my lavender crush rose, is looking pretty good. Seems like it's handling the transplant well. And luckily it's basically a dormant rose, so that always makes it easier for transplanting when things are in that stage. It seems to be doing great. Now I have this other raised bed over here, which typically, especially in my size garden, I wouldn't put a lot of perennials in a raised bed because my growing space is so limited. But I did end up putting perennials in this bed because this bed is just a little funny. It gets some like water splash off from the house, even with our gutters. Like, we've gotten our gutters cleaned years after year, and it doesn't, somehow there's still water that splashes off one of the roof lines. So this bed has a little bit of issue with just water washing things out. I've also had some issues with like the soil being disrupted and washing away. So I put in a few perennials in hopes that would kind of hold the soil together, and then they also would just be a little bit harder, more hardy for the kind of little bit of a beat up that they get from being hit by all that water. So I planted in a few echinacea plants that look like they're doing well and coming back up. And then I just added my Indian summer rudbeckias that I started from seed last summer. So they were pretty established plants. I'll try to keep them in the shade. These two in the corner. These are the Indian summer rudbeckias I started last summer. So I'm hoping that they'll be just even bigger of a head start. There's also a Gara somewhere in there, and then a couple of echinaceas coming up, and we'll see how they do. There is, we'll see, there is a perennial, it's a Figaro mixed dahlia somewhere in this area, and last year it overwintered and came back up. So I've had luck with it overwintering, so we'll see if it overwinters again. And then these are just the rudbeckias, or no, these are the echinaceas, and then those are the Indian summers. And then I just planted out my foxglove. So these are Excelsior foxgloves. They are a biannual, so they technically bloom on their second year. But these, again, I started the seeds in those two plants right there. I started the seeds in July of last year, overwintered them in the unheated greenhouse. They've been really healthy and they look pretty big, and I'm really hoping that they end up blooming this year. So that was my goal with starting them last summer, was to see if I could get them to basically bloom, that this year will be their second year. Technically it's not like a full second year, but we'll see if they bloom. I would really love it. I have a couple of what is the name of it? I keep forgetting all the names of the plants. I have a couple first year blooming foxglove, and I'm gonna stick like one or two of those in this bed as well, so that hopefully we get some foxglove blooms, because for my whimsical cottage vibes of the garden this year, I think there's nothing more whimsical than a foxglove, right? Like willow trees, foxgloves, hollyhocks too, although I don't have any hollyhocks started yet. Those are all like such whimsical cottage garden plants. Roses, you know, some of these kind of staples. I probably should go look and see if I can find a first year flowering foxglove, hollyhock. Right now, as I'm thinking about this, it might be kind of cool to see if I could find a first year flowering hollyhock and see if I could put one of them in here. Or that's also something that I could probably just pick up at the garden center. Things like a hollyhock, it seems like you should probably just start it from seed, but I don't know, maybe just getting one from the garden center and having it bloom the first year might be worth it, and it would definitely add more cottage vibes. There's also, next to these foxglove over here, there's also some Russian sage, which is coming up. I don't have a great garden for Russian sage because my soil tends to be pretty wet. You can see the Russian sage right there. There's another one that's hopefully going to start leafing out. We tend to get so much rain that we just don't have that like hot, dry environment that Russian sage really like. And I tried to grow some in containers even last year, and it just, I don't know, didn't really do well. Both lavender and Russian sage I really struggle with, but I love them so much, and I love the look of them, and I love that the bees love them. So if I can't get them to grow this year, then I will probably just give up on Russian sage for right now and probably substitute in maybe some different kinds of catmint, because that has a similar sort of look with the narrow, tall stalks, and catmint has done so well for me. I think it handles probably the wet conditions a bit better. I have the lesser catmint in this container. This is going to be its second full summer with me, and it is such a great perennial, so beautiful, and just the bees absolutely love it. I think I did a video last summer talking about like plants to bring pollinators into your garden, and that is number one. Nothing has brought more pollinators into my garden than that catmint. It is literally covered all season long, so highly recommend if you want to bring in pollinators. And it's really pretty, and again, kind of like with that like sagey kind of look. It has the little spears and of a ton of tiny little flowers. It's very pretty. So that has definitely come back. Very hardy plant too, which is nice, especially for growing perennials in containers. This is a Heliopsis, hopefully. I don't see any, I think that's like I don't see any signs of life yet. Maybe, oh, maybe, there we go. Oh, good, I'm just gonna keep it. I think this is a weed, but I'm not gonna pull anything out because this is my first year with the Heliopsis coming back up. So I got it last summer and it's overwintering. I did plant some peas around it just to add a little bit of green, but I've never had it come back up. So I'm just gonna kind of wait and see what happens with this. But a really pretty sun perennial and just absolutely like stunning. So hopefully it comes back and grows really well in this container, but kind of a little bit of a toss-up. We'll see what happens. And then, okay, here's the Pugster Blue butterfly bush, growing very happily in a grow bag. This thing is loving life, and so obviously is still alive, survived the winter very nicely. In this container is a perennial banana plant. It's supposed to be a hardy banana. Now, I don't see any growth yet, but I'm waiting patiently, and hopefully it'll come back up. Some perennials, you know, take longer, and obviously we're not past our last frost, so I'm not gonna worry just yet. I'm gonna give it plenty of time. It's definitely, when it's your first year with a plant coming back, it's definitely good to be kind of cautious before taking any drastic measures, because some things do just, you know, come up slower, and you don't want to inadvertently, I feel like I've definitely done that, like been like, okay, that plant's dead, like let's get something else, and then the plant pops up and you're like, oh, okay. So I'm trying with all of these plants that it's my first year with them wintering over to just be patient, just in case I'm, you know, not used to it. Like the phlox, I'm used to that. I've had that for a few years now, so I knew exactly when it would be coming up. No surprises there. Last year I went ahead and invested in a bunch of perennials and put a bunch of perennials in containers, so now I'm kind of learning this spring how everything acts and how it's going to react, and especially react to container life, because that always makes things different as well. Here we have a blueberry bush, clearly alive, clearly doing great. And this is a black-eyed Susan, and these are really pretty. Oh good, yep, here he comes. This is a really pretty echinacea, absolutely stunning, kind of like a cupcake style echinacea. No growth on that one yet. I had 2 of them, so we'll see what happens with that. And then over here, these are some anise hyssop, and they've kind of been like at this stage all winter, so that's been kind of nice, because it's a little bit like having yeah, they've been basically evergreen. I trimmed them back, they did die off, their flower stalks died off, and then they've been just sitting around at this stage, which is really pretty and sweet. And so they're doing great. Very happy in a container, and it's nice to have some things, these kind of hardy plants like the catmints, the hyssops. They're such sturdy, hardy, no fuss plants that they're really great for the container perennial life. I feel like, you know, if you're gonna overwinter perennials in containers, they do need to be kind of a bit sturdy. Oh my goodness, there's some squirrels like having a battle or something. Not quite sure what's going on. Squirrels are running around on the fence line chasing each other. Okay, the last perennial I wanted to show you is the Clematis. If you have been with me throughout the winter, you know I have been babying these Clematis. I put them in the unheated greenhouse for extra protection when we've had really cold nights. I just really wanted the Clematis to do well, and they are starting to leaf out, and they look so happy. So here they are. Here's one on one side of the arch, and here's the other, and they are starting to leaf out. I didn't really trim them back because neither of them got very big. These are Stillwater Clematis, so I believe they are the type of Clematis that you can trim back. They bloom on both old and new wood. But yeah, I just didn't feel like I needed to, because they barely took off last year. I got them and they both just kind of sat. Didn't really get a super huge show on them. But they're such beautiful Clematis. I kind of like bought them for the potential, and so I'm really hoping that this year I actually get the full show with all of the flowers and everything. They're a part shade vine. It can be kind of hard when you have as much shade as I do. They're a vine that can do better in a little bit of shade. So Clematis tend to be able, and you see different recommendations of what to grow in shade. Clematis tend to be one that can handle some part shade. So this arch does get a decent amount of sun. I grew tomatoes on it last year, and they were very, very happy. And obviously tomatoes like sun. You can see how the morning sun really hits the trellis. But the Clematis is going to be growing in these containers alongside of the tomatoes growing over the arch. So hopefully the tomatoes will provide just enough protection that the Clematis can grow really well and have the conditions that they like too. At least that is the plan. So that is sort of how all the perennials are doing. It's just so great to see them all coming up and starting to get ready to grow. This is this next month, next 6 to 8 weeks, things are really going to change in this garden. We are getting so close to some of the big changes, and that is really encouraging. But just a beautiful day out here. So thank you as always for watching, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye bye.